Alright, in this video we're going to be integrating paystack into a normal Python application. Alright, so let's just get into it. Okay. So let me create my folder. Call this paystack API integration. Okay. Then we open this up with code. Okay, so yeah, I know that flash was. Okay, so this is paystack API documentation. So first thing first, let's really learn how to read this API. Now, most of the systems, they get to show you how to, first of all, what to expect basically from each response, each endpoint you send, the way to send them, practical steps that are like rules and laws that you need to follow in order to perfectly and seamlessly integrate their APIs. Okay, so basically showing the HTTP methods. Well, a sample request and responses, meta objects, supported currency. Okay, I want to first make mention to the supported currencies. Okay, so the way paystack does this, they take the subunits and convert it to the next value. Okay, for example, if for example Nigeria here, we use Kobo as the subunit in the sense that that is the minimum value our currency can be, right? Okay, so 100 naira, rather 100 kobo equates to a naira, right? So if you want to do such thing as 100 naira, that would be 100 times 100. That's going to give you 10,000 as you see here. So the way it works, to have 200 naira, you have to use 20,000, and the list goes on and on. So each country has their own, or each nation rather, such as USD, which is the cent, Ghana cedis, which is the Pasiwa, and South African rand, which is the cent also. Okay, so let's just keep on moving forward. Next thing, you have the authentication, right? Authentication. Okay, so they don't really allow anyone to just use these APIs. They have to know who is calling the request at a particular time and where, most time, where it might be calling from, right? So you're accessing not just an API in the sense, you're actually accessing the database, right? So an API is created, API application program interface is created in the sense that anyone with any medium or any app can be able to access your DB. That is basically, at this, I believe at this base definition, that is what an API is, right? So they don't just allow anyone to just come access it. You have to be authenticated, they have to know you, and you have to have access, basically. Okay, so the first thing you see in authentication is to make calls to the API, you need to have a secret key. And to get the secret key, you actually have to log in, right? Create an account paystack. You have this up here. Okay, no, not this. Let me close this. Hit that. Okay, so this is a paystack dashboard for developers basically. Now you go to settings, you go to API keys and webhooks. You can see your secret key, right? That's what you want. Okay, so this secret key, as you can see, I'm not going to copy that, right? Is a test secret key, meaning this is a test mode. The test mode is basically, it's kind of a sandbox they give to play with. Say, okay, you are not going to be making real payments, but you're just going to have the feel of what it is to learn how to use our API without having any additional cost to yourself. It's more of like the dummy data you play with before integrating the main thing, which should be live. Yeah, live mode. Okay, so we have our secret key, you have our public key. I'll just copy the secret key for now. Okay, let's go back to our notification. Okay, so the way you use the secret key, you implement it in your request header, right? With authorization, the bearer token. When we begin coding, you see more of that in action. Just skip all this and go straight transactions. Okay. Okay, so the first transaction you see is initialize transaction. But before we go that far, let me first of all create our file, main.py. Okay. Then Python has a package known as request. What request does is basically makes requests with endpoint mode methods such as post, get, patch, delete. The list goes on. Right. First thing we do is import this requests. Right. Okay. What is request? Okay, and we have our secret key. The space that there. Right. Again, this is not the best practice, right? Because this secret key is very important. Someone can have this and that's it. If it's a live key, this is basically having access to your customers' details, your transactions. Can even implement it on that app and you know do a lot of damage. Okay, so what you're gonna do is you really want to hide this key. I'm just showing you now because I'm obviously generating new after this video. If I upload the video rather, okay. So there's something called environmental variables. Environmental variables in the sense that these are variables that your code can see, right? But they are not actually in the code. Okay, so if you look at a GitHub repository, you check the git ignore file, you see something called .env. You see the file there. So you see that file. If you look at that file, you see a lot of things that are are listed, right? Be it folder names, be it file names, or file extensions. These details are not meant to be shown to the public. So that's why they're ignored from your GitHub before you push. You have to use them later on when you're deploying online. Many platforms such as AWS Render, they give you access to implement your environmental variables. Okay. Next file we're going to say .env, right? Environmental variables. So we're going to include our secret key into here. Okay. Let's remove this quote, not necessary. Wow. Sorry about that. Okay. Okay, that's better. Okay, so I just did two things. I switched tabs and I looked at my clipboard. So these are basic Windows commands, just in case you're not familiar with them. So the switch tab is Control and Tab, right? So when you're coding, you can switch to the next, or when you're on Chrome, you can also switch to the next, right? And the other one is Windows V. Windows V basically opens the clipboard for you to have access to it. Okay, so this secret key, I've placed it in our environmental variables. Now I just have to delete this from here. Yeah. Now to make our code to be able to know, okay, check the .env file. That means it's a .env file. Once you look into that file, you're gonna see a key, or rather a variable known as secret key. So we're going to use that to implement. So what you're gonna do, so this is you're gonna say import OS. Now they say package for this. Yes. From .env import load, sorry about that, load.env. Okay, so this load.env is just basically saying, all right, I just load everything out. So just call this function out. All right. Now, let's separate this. Okay, now we can do os.environ.get. Then we'll call the name of our variable secret key. Okay, so let's see if this actually works. Print secret key out. Okay, Python main.py. Okay, it works. So it's able to print out our secret key for us without necessarily having to write it here. Okay. Let me arrange this up here. All right. Okay, let's go back to wow, that's very bright. So apologies for the change in brightness. The screen I'm using is just really up there. Okay, so transactions. The first thing you see is initialize transaction. So you initialize the transaction basically from your backend, which is from the Python code you're writing, right? And thing about an API is they basically give you a sort of blueprint. It's like, okay, this is this, right? Implement this in a way that you implement this in a way that you'll be able to. It's more sort of a pseudocode, right? So that you can use to implement in whatever you want. Okay, so first in initialize transactions, show the headers, right? So headers are key, right? The headers are key in the sense that they are what your request actually checks before checking the body. Yeah, so in the headers you can hide various information there. You can hide authorization, you can hide content type, you can hide key tokens, you can place a lot of things in your headers. Right. So in their headers they say they want you to provide for that endpoint, which is the initialized transaction, to provide an authorization and also a content type, right? And they specify them. There is bearer secret key and application JSON. Okay, so let's get to this, right? So we have our function, say what? Initialize the transaction. Okay, let's just pass this for now. All right. So, like I said, first thing first, the headers, right? We're gonna say headers. Then we'll give it a dictionary. First thing we'll say you have is authorization, right? Now remember, authorization is bearer, then your secret key. So we're gonna use a formatted string. Let's see, bearer. Then we'll call the secret key up there, secret key, right? Then what is next? Content type. Okay, content type, right? That should be applications like JSON, applications like JSON. Okay, okay, that's that. The next thing you're gonna do is highlight your endpoints, right? So when I say API, they give you sort of a blueprint of everything they have going on there, right? If you look at this portion, right, you see URL. So it's basically saying call this and URL, I refer to them as endpoints. So basically get this endpoint, right? That is transaction initialize. Then you send the authorization, the content type, and your data. Okay, so we're gonna say endpoint. You can just copy this from here. Endpoints. Right. Then the authorization, content type, you have your data. Okay. So if you notice, I'm writing this in dictionaries, right? In API, they are actually called JSON data. JSON in the sense of the full meaning of JSON should be, what is it? Okay, Java? Java object notation. Yes, you can look that up and check. Tell me in the comments if that's the correct thing I said, or if not, you can just correct me. Okay, so it's more in Python, we call them dictionaries. Other languages that I will not mention, we call them objects or arrays. Okay, so the first thing you need to have the email and the amount, right? Remember, we're making a transaction, so your customer does have an email and also could include the amount which they want, right? So say the email, you can also send an email, say John, let me something generic, John Doe at email.com. Okay, all right, that's problem. Okay, John Doe at email.com, then the amount. Remember, I said the amount is subunits in the sense that From the lowest unit of your currency, you multiply that to the unit which is in circulation or which paystack accepts. So since we're dealing with Naira, for example, we are going to multiply that by 100. So we're going to say, I'm going to work with 50K now, right? So if I pop up my calculator, okay, so that is on 50 times, it's going to be 100, 5 million. So for 50K, we're going to say 5 million. Okay, and put this in string. Okay, 5 million, yeah. Okay, now we want to send this request now to the API. We're going to have what do you call this, response, because the moment you send the request, you get a response back. So response request dot, remember you call the method, right? If you look at this, like I said, this is sort of a blueprint on how you should go about this. So from the moment you look at this, okay, let me scroll down a bit. They did not specify. Okay, it's up here. Okay, so this is a post method, right? Now, posts. Then we're going to call URL. It's going to be our endpoint. The headers, which is going to be our headers, and the data, which is going to be our data. Then else print this response out. Okay, so run our code again. Let's see. I haven't called the function. Okay, now we are just going to run this code to see what we get. All right, let me increase this up. Okay, Python management.py go. Okay, now you see we get a response 200, right? What is basically saying that, okay, we have sent a request and we're getting a response 200. 200 is status code. If you go to back to the introduction, let's go down, will it be here? Okay, they didn't specify. They did not specify. Let's check the transactions. Okay, if you see in this transaction, right, where you initialize the transaction, for the response for that same request, you get an okay response, right? 200 okay, that means it works, it went well. Okay, but why are we not seeing it in this format, but rather we're seeing it like this, right? Everything all boils down to JSON, like I told you. So we have to read. So what we're doing right now, we're reading the object rather than reading the JSON itself, the JSON data. Okay, so this is what we're gonna do, right? We're gonna say, printed a response, right? Good enough. I'm gonna say, so print response, say print response dot JSON. Now run that code once more. Okay. Now if you can see this, we have our JSON data. Now you say, okay, this, yeah, looks like a dictionary, but in general terms, we just call it JSON. Okay, let me just interpret what this means. We have our status, which is true. The message, which is authorization URL created. The data. So inside the data, we have the authorization URL, which is this. We have the access code, which is this. We have our reference, which is this. So if you are building a real world application, you most times you'll be advised to make this reference by yourself, right? So you generate the reference from your backend basically and send it alongside the request they are sending to the initialized transaction endpoint. Then you also save send it to the front end, authorization URL. This is what sends to the front end in your own application, basically. You can also save the access code of your choice. Anything you want your database in real world applications. All right. Okay. Let's move forward. Let me move this Control J. You remove your terminal. Okay, so these are our full code for initializing a transaction. Now, if you go to your paystack, remember the email I used, johndoe@gmail.com, right? Okay, you go to transactions. An error occurred. What error occurred? Let me refresh this page. I'll just fast forward this process. Okay, we go to transactions. Okay, sorry about that. Is customers, all right. Okay, you go to customers. So it says the customers, you see two emails. I was using this for a test before. Okay, you see johndoe@email.com. Okay, so this is the customer which just made payments of 50,000 naira, right? A card payment, this today's date. It's basic information that you see here. So if you look at this data once more, bring this back up in focus. It's basically telling us, okay, this person with this email has made this request, right? That's why we can see it. But if you click on the 50K, you see our reference, our channel, which is card, the message. You can see the state of the whole transaction, which is abandoned. So it's basically abandoned because we're still in test mode. It's not yet a live system. Okay, so let's go back to the documentation and see what's next. Now, once you have initialized a transaction from the backend, usually you send this response to the front end. So what the front end does is it picks the authorization URL and with an SDK basically and sends to paystack end. So at paystack end, they will look at the transaction and say, okay, they make transaction that ends and they give the feedback to the front end. So what you do at the back end right now, you verify that transaction to say, okay, is this transaction legit or not? Because anybody can send anything, right? Basically, if a transaction happens and the transaction does not reflect on paystack end that, okay, this is a transaction that has taken place, there can be some sort of issues in your system. Okay, so the transaction verification, or as we call it, verified transaction. Let's get on with that. So we just move this, or and comment it. I'll say verify. Sorry, verify transactions. Okay, let's pass this for now. All right. Okay, so this new function we have is to verify the transaction. So same thing as before, we have our headers. So in headers, you see something like authorization, right? Set value to bearer secret. So basically the same thing as we did here. So we can literally just copy this, right, and paste it here, then get rid of this. Because only one field is asking for in the headers. So we get rid of this. Right. But now this is the thing. There is something in programming called dry, basically saying don't repeat yourself. Right. So we need to write efficient code or code that is readable and code that looks well organized in the sense. It has to be dry. Basically, you're not repeating yourself. Right. So if you look at what we have done here so far, we are going to repeat ourselves more and more as much as possible. Let me just show you what I mean. Okay, we have our headers, right? So now this is a get method. It's not a post method. So we're not sending any data, we're rather fetching data now, right? So we're fetching data based on a reference. So the reference, if you can remember the first function that just happened, we have a reference of this, right? So we're going to copy this, Control C. Okay. Okay. I've copied that. Then, okay, we do this. Endpoints. We again come here to copy these endpoints that they've given us. Basically copy those things. Right. Formatted string. Okay. Now you see this reference is in a formatted string with curly brackets, meaning it's more of a variable. So the best way to do this, we give it a param called reference. So the reason why I'm doing is that we can use this function over and over again and send different references to it without having to manually come to edit it. And that's one of the great things I like about programming, in the sense that you find ways to automate simple tasks just within your code base. And it's very beautiful. Okay, so reference, we have endpoints, then we're going to send a request. So we want to get a response, send a request. Remember, dot get this time because our feature are not posting anything anymore. We are not sending data. That's why we did not list any data out. Right, so get. So URL, basically our endpoints, then also the headers. Okay, sorry about that. Getting ahead of myself. Only headers, right? Then print response dot again JSON, so we can see the JSON data that's inside. Okay. All right. Let's utilize this and see. Verify transact. Then remember that reference we've copied, the reference equals to that reference, sorry. Windows V, open your clipboard, click it. All right. Okay. So basically, okay, so we can run our server now. So just make this so that it can be readable. Okay. All right. So say python main.py, run this again. Okay, now you send this plenty data. Status equals to true. Message says verification successful. We have our data which shows ID. So basically what it's showing you is the same response that it says you will get once you send this request. So they verify transaction endpoint. Now you don't necessarily have to save all this data. You can just pick the ones that you or really need, such as I would advise you pick the customer ID, right? Since as first name, last name, you be one. There's no need for that. You can just drop that. Customer code. I believe you've gotten this already. Okay, no. Okay, customer code. You can decide to save that, right? Okay. So I will not waste time getting through all of this, but that's basically it. It verifies, okay, now your backend now, or rather your system knows that yes, this transaction is actually valid at the most. Okay. Okay, now if you look at what I was talking about before, talking about dry. Now this code is not dry in the sense that we have the same endpoint starting from here, repeating itself here, right? We have same headers here, repeating themselves here. Right. So the best way I'll say is to go about this is to first list them from the top. Then you can start utilizing them in each of the functions because we don't just have a little function, there are like tens of them, or rarely is over 10 functions. But in Syria, we're not going to cover all that, just 5. Okay, so to make sure this program is dry, you can go up and say headers, right? Same. Authorization, right? Same. So whether same. Nahara, Viera, what? Viera, right? Now secret key. Now we can eliminate this. Also eliminate this. Okay, we still have the endpoints that are still look similar in the way. So we say endpoint. We just copy this. Okay. Then we can reference that now. So it's more of using formatted strings to get that same endpoint. Say f, right? F endpoint. What's going on? Okay, formatted string f endpoint coming. Yes, f endpoint slash. No need for the slash anymore. Okay. Okay, so we are using the same variable name as up. So just call this the base URL. Base URL. Base URL. Okay. Still not agreeing with me. Sorry about that. Okay. Yeah. All right. So we give this a base URL, basically saying this URL that's occurring in each and every one of them. So if you see this will actually reduce the code. Okay, so for initialized transaction, we had two things in the headers. So you can just see headers, if you can recall, plus content type, which is applications like JSON. So content type, right, equals to application slash JSON. Okay. So we aren't repeating ourselves anymore, we're just appending to it at this point. Okay, same thing here. We can remove all this. Then just simply say base URL. There's no need for this. Yeah. Okay. That's nice. So we just our code is dry now. Okay, so since we have verified, we can move on to the next endpoint, which is list transaction. The list transaction is basically just say, okay, give me all the transactions that I have done so far, all the transactions I've done regarding my paystack account. Now, these transactions can be filtered. Yeah, we can filter these transactions. Okay, so if you go to this place, see something called query parameters. I am so sorry, I should have. Okay, so the first one, I should have mentioned this earlier. Path parameters, that's where we got the reference. That is basically saying, okay, this is our path. Our path is same as URL, same as the endpoint, right? So we're just saying, okay, you append this to it, it's a path parameter. So there are params also. So there's also query parameters. So query parameters are when you are when you are in a website and you see something like a question mark, right? Or maybe question mark then search when you are trying to find something online. That is a query parameter. Okay, so we show the options. Okay, so query parameters, anyone you want to use can put a page per page. That is basically saying it's retrieving per page and each page has 50 records by each page. That's default. Then the page, what exact page number you want to go to, customer ID, terminal ID, status, from, to, amount. So basically things like that. You're just basically filtering what you want to fetch from the database. Should I write an endpoint for this? Okay, I'll just list it. Okay, so def list transaction. So list transaction, we don't give it a reference. We have our endpoint. You can see now I don't need to specify headers anymore. Our endpoint. So we have our endpoint. It's gonna be base URL. Sorry about that. Base URL. Okay. So just slash transaction. Okay. Transaction. Okay. The response. Request. Remember, I still a get because we're getting something from them. Get URL point. Give the headers to the same headers. Basically. And go simply print response to JSON. Okay. So once more, list transaction. Then you can run this. What is this? Okay. Let's clear what I have there before. You can run this to python.py. Nothing happened. Why? Print response to JSON. Okay. Why? Nothing happened. Okay. Print, I don't know, list transact. Okay, so instead of print, I will just simply return this because I was getting ahead of myself there. So basically changing that to return. So return statement just going to return the JSON file back so that I can print it out, whatever I want to do with it. Okay. Good. So this just basically listing all the transactions I've done on this platform, or rather on my paystack account. Nothing much there. Okay, same thing as fetch transaction, or fetching just a single record. Maybe you are fetching based off on, yes, an ID of a person, ID of a customer. Same thing, you pass in your param and you pass param. Basically, what I'm get to is charge authorization. So charge authorization is basically that charging from the endpoint. That means you receive your payment, since all authorization marked as reusable can be charged with this endpoint wherever you need to receive payments. So once the need comes to receive payments, you can just trigger this, and that is it.
So yeah, for the charge, you can also do the same thing for charge for transaction timeline, transaction totals, bunch of them. Yeah, it's gonna be long if we go through all this. It's gonna be long. All right, so there you have it. How to integrate paystack API, and also how to read from a documentation. If you have any questions, any more opinion, any insights, going to do another video or something to explain something, whatever, just drop it in the comments. All right.